Rain slicked the glass facade of the tower, catching the reflection of a woman in a deep red coat that fit her shoulders like armor. Her heels clicked against marble as she pushed through the lobby doors, eyes flashing with something between desperation and command. This was Evelyn Marlowe, CEO of one of the city's most powerful tech firms, but her voice quivered as she choked out to her boardroom, "If you can teach her to speak again, I'll give you everything." The sentence silenced even the most hardened executives. They knew she wasn't talking about some client or a lost deal. She was talking about her only daughter, a little girl who hadn't spoken a word since the night she witnessed her father's tragic passing. The story should have ended there, in wealth and privilege colliding with grief. But destiny often takes sharp turns in the most unlikely places. That turn began in the basement of the same tower, where Miguel, the janitor, pushed his cart past flickering fluorescent lights. His shoes were cracked along the seams, duct-taped at the sole, and his hoodie sagged with the damp chill of the evening. He paused to count the coins in his palm. Enough for bus fare home, barely enough for bread. He had a daughter too, or he used to, before illness took her voice and eventually her life. Each time he heard children laugh in the lobby, something tightened in his chest. Evelyn's child, Clara, was fragile yet striking, with hair that fell like black silk across her pale cheeks. She sat curled in her mother's sleek leather office chair, hugging a stuffed bear so worn its seams bulged. The fridge in the private lounge was full of sparkling water, imported fruit, and untouched catered trays, but Clara ignored it all. She only stared at the floor, lips pressed tight, throat straining as though sound were locked behind glass. Evelyn brushed her own glossy hair back from her forehead, her fitted blazer stretching as she leaned to whisper, "Baby, please. Just one word." Days passed. Specialists came and went, therapists with crisp suits and clinical voices. They used toys, flashcards, rewards. They spoke of trauma, patience, neuroplasticity. Nothing broke through. Evelyn's board grew restless, whispering that the CEO was slipping, her presence shrinking as she carried her child into meetings, as if defying the corporate world to question a mother's grief. At night, in her penthouse with panoramic views of the glittering skyline, Evelyn walked past closets lined with designer heels and gowns, her reflection fractured in mirrored walls. She saw a woman who had everything, except the one thing that mattered. The re-hook came the night she found Miguel sitting on the lobby floor with Clara. Evelyn had rushed down, furious, when she discovered her daughter missing from the playroom upstairs. She stopped short when she saw them. The janitor held out a paper cup of weak vending machine cocoa. Clara touched the rim with cautious fingers. Miguel didn't speak. He only hummed, low and steady, like a lullaby without words. Evelyn's throat tightened. "What are you doing?" she snapped, heels striking as she approached. Miguel stood, lowering his gaze, voice rough. "Sometimes silence needs company more than correction." Evelyn wanted to dismiss him, but Clara's eyes lingered on the man longer than she had looked at anyone in weeks. From then on, Evelyn found them together in small, stolen moments. Miguel would draw simple shapes on a notepad, sliding it toward Clara without pressure. A flower, a bird, a girl with braids. Clara would trace them with trembling fingers. One evening, Evelyn noticed a sketch Miguel had left behind. A child with a speech bubble empty but outlined, waiting to be filled. Still, hardship stalked him. When Evelyn finally asked, she learned Miguel slept in a single-room basement apartment where the radiator barely worked. His fridge held only 2 eggs, half a loaf of stale bread, and milk one day from souring. A notice curled on his door frame, "Rent overdue." His backpack was frayed, the zipper replaced by safety pins. He washed his uniform each night in the sink, hanging it over the chair to dry. Yet when he stood before Clara, he carried himself with quiet dignity, shoulders square even in exhaustion. The tension reached its peak when Clara fell ill one rainy night. Evelyn rushed her to the hospital, tears streaking her perfectly made-up face. Doctors whispered about stress, immune weakness. Miguel, who had overheard, appeared at the ER clutching a small notebook. "She needs to know someone hears her," he said softly. Evelyn almost shouted at him to leave, but Clara stirred at the sound of his voice. Her small hand reached toward him, eyes glistening with something Evelyn hadn't seen in months. Trust. Evelyn froze, every wall of pride and wealth trembling. Her daughter had chosen. The CEO throat closed, her hand covering her lips as if stifling a sob. Miguel crouched by Clara's bed, pen poised, sketching slowly, waiting for her to respond. Evelyn could only watch, heartbreaking and rebuilding at once, wondering if this janitor, this man with nothing, was about to give her everything. Part 2. Miguel's hand moved carefully across the notebook, sketching a simple bird with wings spread wide. Clara's eyes followed, her small fingers trembling as they reached for the pencil he left by her side. Evelyn stood frozen, the fluorescent hospital light gleaming against her sleek black dress, her heels silent on the tiled floor. Her daughter hadn't reached for anything in months, but now she clutched the pencil, pressing it down clumsily, tracing the wings. Miguel didn't speak. He only smiled, eyes soft, as if he had been waiting for this moment all his life. Evelyn felt her throat tighten, a sound catching in her chest that was half sob, half relief. Over the next days, Miguel returned to the hospital whenever his shift ended, often in the same faded hoodie, the elbows patched and the fabric smelling faintly of bleach. He carried no flowers, no expensive toys, only his notebook and a box of crayons borrowed from a charity office. Clara began to wait for him, her stuffed bear pressed to her chest until he arrived. They drew together, rainbows, houses, little stick, figure families. Miguel would hum softly, and sometimes he would whisper single syllables. Ma, pa, sky. Clara listened, lips twitching as though rehearsing in silence. Evelyn watched from the corner, her heart pounding each time her daughter's lips parted. One evening, Evelyn leaned against the window, city lights sparkling like jewels below. She pulled her leather jacket around her, though the room was warm. "Why her?" she asked quietly when Miguel set down his notebook. He looked at her, weariness lining his face. "Because once I had a daughter." She lost her voice too. "I thought I could fix it, but I couldn't. She didn't recover. Maybe helping Clara is my way of hearing her again." His voice cracked, rough and bare, and Evelyn's polished exterior fractured. She saw him not as a janitor, but as a father who had walked through hardship. Hook came the night Clara finally tried. Miguel had drawn a tiny sun with rays. He pointed to it, humming SSS. Clara pressed her lips together, eyes darting to her mother, then back. Her throat worked, a tiny squeak escaping. SSS. It was broken, fragile, but a word. Evelyn gasped, hand flying to her mouth as tears blurred her vision. She dropped to her knees beside her daughter, laughing through sobs. "Baby, you did it. You spoke." Clara leaned into her, still clutching Miguel's crayon, smeared paper. Evelyn looked at Miguel, her mascara streaking, and whispered, "You succeeded. You actually did it." But joy carried shadows. Miguel's landlord had changed the lock on his basement door. Evelyn found him outside the tower one morning, his backpack slung low, duct tape peeling from his sneakers, eyes hollow from a sleepless night on a shelter cot. Evelyn, draped in a tailored ivory coat, stopped in her tracks. He tried to brush it off, mumbling, "It's fine. I'll manage." But she saw his hands shaking, saw the man who had given her daughter back her voice standing with nowhere to go. She swallowed hard. "No, you won't just manage. Not anymore." The resolution unfolded like light breaking through storm clouds. Evelyn moved Miguel into one of her company's staff apartments, modest but warm, with a stocked fridge and working heat. At first he resisted, pride stiff in his posture, but Evelyn pressed the keys into his hand. "You gave me my child back," she said, voice steady. "Let me give you a place to breathe." Miguel stood still, the metal cold against his palm, then nodded once, tears threatening. Weeks later, Clara spoke more short words tumbling into sentences. She no longer stared at the floor, but pointed at drawings with excitement. Evelyn attended board meetings again, her stride fierce, but now she sometimes arrived with crayons smudged on her hands. She no longer cared. At the company's holiday gathering, Evelyn raised a glass in her crimson dress, her daughter beside her, Miguel watching quietly from the back. She told the room, sometimes the greatest teachers aren't the ones with degrees or titles. They're the ones who have lost the most and still choose to give. The crowd applauded, but Evelyn's eyes found only Miguel's, shining under the twinkle lights. On Christmas Eve, Clara handed Miguel a small wrapped box. Inside was a brand new sketchbook, bought with Evelyn's money but chosen by Clara herself. The first page held her own drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands under a bright sun. Above them, in uneven but proud letters, she had written one word, family. Miguel's hand trembled as he closed the book against his chest, his breath catching. Evelyn touched his arm, her voice low. "You're not just our janitor anymore. You're part of us." The moral settled quietly in the air, like snow outside the windows. That one act of generosity, Miguel's choice to sit with silence instead of demanding sound, had rerouted a life. And in return, Evelyn's choice to see him not as a man beneath her, but as a man beside her, gave him back a home, a family, and dignity he thought was gone forever. We all carry that power to notice, to pause, to help. Sometimes, it only takes one act to change everything.